Good afternoon. This morning, while New Yorkers were making their way to work, a terrorist set off a pipe bomb strapped to his body in one of Manhattan's busiest commuter hubs. Thankfully, there were no life-threatening injuries. Undercover Port Authority Police Department officer Jack Collins apprehended the terrorist along with several other officers. These brave first responders and the others who rushed to the scene are heroes. On behalf of the President and a grateful nation, we would like to thank them and commend them for their bravery. This attack underscores the need for Congress to work with the President on immigration reforms that enhance our national security and public safety. We must protect our borders, we must ensure that individuals entering our country are not coming to do harm to our people, and we must move to a merit-based system of immigration. Additionally, this attack comes as our coalition continues to make great gains against ISIS. Still, there is more work to be done on the ground in the shrinking ISIS-controlled areas, and the President's plan to annihilate ISIS is moving forward. But we must also destroy the evil ideology that is behind ISIS and attacks like today's. This ideology has no borders, but it must be eradicated. The President has successfully rallied the world behind this cause, and we will not stop until it is accomplished. And with that, I'll take your questions. Francesca.
Thank you, Sarah. Wanted to ask you about the women who came forward today against the President. They first were on a television show, and then they were at a press conference, and they said that he should resign, and then also that there should be a congressional investigation. And I know that you said that this has already been litigated in the last election, but I wanted to get your specific reaction to this idea that there should be a congressional investigation into this.
Look, the President has addressed these accusations directly and denied all of these allegations, and this took place long before he was elected to be president, and the people of this country had a decisive election, supported President Trump, and we feel like these allegations have been answered through that process. Kristen.
Sarah, thank you. I want to follow up on that. But first, a little bit of breaking news we just learned about. The Pentagon apparently will now allow transgender people to enlist in the military beginning January 1st. Your reaction to that and any follow-up action you're going to take?
Yeah, as of right now, they're simply complying with a court order and preparing to implement a previous policy to remain in compliance. The Department of Justice is currently reviewing the legal options to ensure that the President's directive can be implemented. And for anything further and any specifics on both of those matters, I'd refer you to the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice.
Okay, one follow-up very quickly on friendship. Just very quickly, Sarah.
Sorry, Kristen.
Can I just ask you about Nikki Haley's comments saying that the President deserves to be heard?
I'll pick that up.
She's going to pick it up for you today.
Nikki Haley, as I'm sure you know, said when asked, does the election mean that's a settled issue, which you've been arguing from the podium here, she said, I know he was elected, but women should always feel comfortable coming forward. We should all be willing to listen to them, specifically referring to the accusers of the President. Does the President agree with her?
Look, as the President said himself, he thinks it's a good thing that women are coming forward, but he also feels strongly that a mere allegation shouldn't determine the course. And in this case, the President has denied any of these allegations, as have eyewitnesses, and several reports have shown those eyewitnesses also back up the President's claim in this process. And again, the American people knew this and voted for the President, and we feel like we're ready to move forward in that process.
The women who accused him are coming forward now again?
The President has said that it's a good thing for women to be able to feel comfortable in coming forward, generally speaking. Jacqueline.
I just want to go off of that, Sarah, but the President told Howard Stern in 2005 that he had walked into a teen beauty pageant dressing room where he said that teen contestants had no clothes on because he could sort of get away with things like that. Is that not an admission of sexual harassment?
Look, the President's spoken about this directly. I don't have anything further to add on the process.
Charlie,
we're going to do one question today, guys, so move around.
Two ISIS attacks in New York City, or ISIS-inspired attacks in New York City, and just recently, is the President concerned that there is a growing threat against people inspired by ISIS who have been radicalized online?
I think that the president is certainly concerned that Congress, particularly Democrats, have failed to take action in some places where we feel we could have prevented this. Specifically, the president's policy has called for an end to chain migration, and if that had been in place, that would have prevented this individual from coming to the United States. So the president is aggressively going to continue to push forth responsible immigration reform, and ending chain migration would certainly be a part of that process. Matthew.
Thanks, Sarah. The president reacted quite angrily over the weekend to a Washington Post reporter's tweet about crowd size that was quickly deleted. I'm wondering if you can help explain the discrepancy between the president's reaction to incidents like this, which he calls fake news and talks quite a bit about, and his silence on actual disinformation campaigns like Russia ran during the 2016 election to deliberately spread false information. So both his silence on that, and does he recognize the difference between these two?
Difference, look, the president's simply calling out a very direct and false accusation lodged against him. There was nothing more than an individual trying to put their bias into their reporting, and something that frankly has gotten a little bit out of control. We've seen it time and time again over the last couple of weeks. A number of outlets have had to retract and change and rewrite and make editor's notes to a number of different stories, some of them with major impacts, including moving markets. This is a big problem, and we think it's something that should be taken seriously. Jim?
Reporters' mistakes and disinformation campaign by a foreign government. Does he see a distinction there?
I haven't spoken with him about that, but certainly we would take any misinformation like that very seriously. But it's not something we're comparing the two on. Jim?
And I would just say, Sarah, that journalists make honest mistakes, and that doesn't make them fake news. But the question that I have...
When journalists make honest mistakes, they should own up to them. Sometimes, and a lot of times you don't. But there's a difference. There's a very big... I'm sorry, I'm not finished. There's a very big difference between making honest mistakes and purposefully misleading the American people, something that happens regularly. You can't say, I'm not done. You cannot say, you cannot say that it's an honest mistake when you're purposely putting out information that you know to be false, or when you're taking information that hasn't been validated, that hasn't been offered any credibility, and that has been continually denied by a number of people, including people with direct knowledge of an instance. This is something that I'm speaking about the number of reports that have taken place over the last couple of weeks. I'm simply stating that there should be a certain level of responsibility in that process.
This was not.
Ryan, I called on Jim.
This is not the line of questioning that I was going down, but can you cite a specific story that you say is intentionally false, that was intentionally put out there to mislead the American people?
Sure, the ABC report by Brian Ross, I think that was pretty misleading to the American people, and I think that it's very telling that that individual had to be suspended because of that reporting. I think that shows that the network took it seriously and recognized that it was a problem.
Sarah,
Jim?
if I may, though, I was going to ask a question about something
Well,
else.
you used it on something else. Jim?
If I may,
Sarah,
Not yet. We're going to keep moving, guys.
if I can ask about the
other
president's accusations.
I'm moving
that
to
have
a
been
different
leveled
Jim,
against
I'm
him.
sorry.
I know, but I didn't get a chance to ask the question that I wanted to ask, which is,
Jim.
can you just say once and for all whether these
Jim, I'm going to say once and
accusations-
for all that I'm moving on to Jim Stinson, and I'm not taking another question from you at this point.
I was
Sarah, a
in
question
place
about
to respond
investment-
to your attacks on the
investment
media,
taxes.
If that's okay, I would like to ask the question that I had about these accusations of misconduct against the president. You said that he's denied them. Can you say whether or not they are false?
I'm not
That's
going
all
to
I'm
respond
asking.
to another
You're
question.
not
Go
gonna-
ahead, Jim.
Some investors are saying the tax reform package favors mutual funds over individual investors. Other critics who want tax reform say the bill will cause some tax increases for a few middle-class tax filers. By a few, I mean maybe tens of thousands, but maybe more. Will the president sign the tax bill even if there are inadvertent tax increases and some of the criticisms are correct?
As I've said many times before, our focus and our priorities are making sure that we provide middle-class tax relief and simplifying the code, bringing businesses back here to the U.S. We're going to continue pushing for that and continue working with Congress to make sure we get the best tax package possible. John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Tomorrow there is a special Senate election in Alabama. Back on September the 23rd, the president went down to Huntsville, Alabama, campaigned alongside of Luther Strange, and since that time, he never went down. In the course of the campaign alongside the Republican nominee, Roy Moore. Was the president embarrassed in terms of campaigning alongside Roy Moore? Is that the reason why we didn't see him down there in Alabama?
Look, the president has spoken directly about this race and who he supports and who he doesn't. Due to the legality of that, I'm not going to go any further and would refer you back to his past statements. April?
Sarah, what is the disconnect as it relates to this White House when it comes to then candidate Trump bringing the accusers of Bill Clinton to the debate against Hillary Clinton, and now the accusers of Roy Moore making these accusations and his accusers? What's the disconnect here?
Look, as the president said, he found the allegations troubling. And if they were true, then he should step aside, and ultimately the people of Alabama will make a decision in that race.
Well, what about
Trey?
his own accusers, though? He has accusers as well.
Look, the
who are coming
president
out
has
now.
firsthand knowledge on what he did and didn't do. He can speak directly to those, and he has, and he's addressed them. And I don't have anything further to add.
Will you
Trey?
address the American public about this, because this is spinning and it's focused on him now.
And he's addressed it directly to the American
But will
people.
he? It's
Trey?
coming up new and
Thank you,
afresh,
Sarah.
and more people are now speaking out.
April,
Will
I'm
this-
going to keep moving.
I understand,
I'm
but
trying to
will the
cover as many
president
of your
address the
colleagues
nation
today.
on this? This is a huge issue, Sarah.
I know, and there are a lot of big issues today. I'm trying to cover as many of them as possible by calling on a number of your colleagues. And I've called on Trey, and I'm going to
Will the
move to him.
president come out and address this, please? Sarah, all you have to
He
do is say
has,
yes or no.
April. I've already said, I've already addressed this. The president has addressed it. I don't have anything else to add. Trey.
Thank you, Sarah. Today, the suspected terrorist in New York City was described as a Bangladeshi immigrant. Bangladesh is not on the president's travel ban list. Does today's attack change the way that President Trump is evaluating travel restrictions?
Look, we do know, and the Department of Homeland Security has confirmed that the suspect was admitted to the United States after presenting a passport displaying an F-43 family immigrant visa in 2011. And so we know that the president's policy calls for an end to chain migration, which is what this individual came to the United States through. And if his policy had been in place, then that attacker would not have been allowed to come in the country. That's why the president has pushed for not one part of immigration policy, but a responsible and total immigration reform. And that's why we have to look at all sectors and do what we can to make sure we're doing everything within our power to protect the American people. Olivier?
Thanks, Sarah. At the top of your remarks about ISIS, about the attack today in New York City, you talked about the need to destroy the ideology animating would-be attackers and actual attackers. What policy changes are required to do that? How do you defeat an ideology that's been attempted since 9/11 with really no great success? What are you doing differently? What can you do differently in order to do that?
I think one of the best ways that we have moved forward is in a process where we're allowing the members of the Department of Defense to aggressively move forward in defeating ISIS, and in hopes annihilating a lot of that evil ideology through part of that process. We're going to continue pushing and continue looking for the best ways possible to make sure that we protect Americans. Jessica.
Quick ones on Korea. Do you have an update on sanctions? Last week you said it would be coming in a number of days. And secondly, Victor Cha was just nominated to be the Republic of Korea ambassador. Do you have any comment?
On the first part, we're working through a legal process, and again, hope to have details further on that. It's a little bit more complicated. Once we get through that, we'll be able to walk through a little bit more detailed on the reason for some of the delay. And on the other, I don't have any personnel announcements or comments on that at this time. Go ahead.
Sarah, I'm interested in the comment you made about the suspect in New York. Does the White House has any proof that this suspect was radicalized outside of the United States? He's been a lawful permanent resident living here for some time.
I can't get into any further details on that front at this point, but as we have them available, we'll be happy to let you know. Jennifer?
Why would his chain migration be an issue unless you were saying that
there are certain
something
parts that I'm
happened
aware,
outside the
I'm
US?
allowed to discuss at this point in the process. That's one of them. Anything further I can't get into at this point, but as soon as I can, we'll be happy to let you know. Jennifer?
On space, the president's going to announce this afternoon. Will he call for an increase in spending for NASA, or will there be commercial partnerships, or will he reduce NASA funding in other areas, such as for earth science, which includes the study of climate change?
I'm not going to get ahead of the president's announcement that's coming later today, but we'll have further details once that process is completed. Cecilia?
Two questions. Who are the eyewitnesses who dispute these allegations against the president? And can you stand here right now and say without a doubt, 100% certainty, that the more than dozen women who have come forward to accuse this president of misconduct are lying. Do you wrestle with this personally at all?
I'm here to speak on behalf of the president, and I can say that the president has directly responded and said that these allegations are false, and that's what I'm doing and relaying that information to you. In terms of the specific eyewitness accounts, there have been multiple reports, and be happy to provide them to you after the briefing is completed. Brian?
So let me just follow up on that question a little bit. As a woman standing out there talking to us, I know your job is to relate what the president says. Have you ever been sexually harassed, and do you understand, and I'm not saying by the president, I'm saying ever, and secondly, do you have an empathy for those who come forward, because it's very difficult for women to come forward?
Absolutely would say that I have an empathy for any individual who has been sexually harassed, and that certainly would be the policy of the White House. I'm not here to speak about my personal experience on that front, but I'm here to relay information on behalf of the president, and that's what I'm focused on doing here today. Zeke.
Thanks, Sarah. Following up on the president's announcement last week on Jerusalem as declaring as the capital of Israel, we saw days of protests, sometimes with violent protests in the Middle East, changes to the vice president's schedule as he goes to the region. Does the White House acknowledge, the president acknowledge that that decision increased tensions in an already volatile region?
Look, we're continuing to urge calm, and we're open and willing and want to continue meeting and discussing a peace deal. Look, violence is always going to be the responsibility of those who carry it out, not the president or anyone else. And again, we urge individuals and groups to remain calm, and we want to continue working with our partners, allies, and others in the region to continue moving forward on the peace conversations.
It's more than violence. It's about meetings being canceled. It's about diplomatic outcry from everyone, from the governments of the United Kingdom, the Pope, and the like. So why is it beneficial to the U.S. interest, as the president declared, if all of those groups, all those countries and allies are condemning that announcement?
Look, the president is taking a bold and courageous action on a law that Congress passed and had failed to implement for the last couple of decades. The president simply moving forward and taking that action on legislation that Congress has supported time and time again. George.
Yeah, following up on that, President Abbas, as you know, has said he will not meet with the Vice President next week. Does the President have a reaction to that? And doesn't this mean that the U.S. has effectively taken itself out of the peace process when one side won't even show up to meet with the United States?
We certainly hope not. We find it unfortunate that they're walking away from the opportunity to discuss the future of the region, but the administration remains undeterred in its efforts to help achieve peace between Israelis and Palestinians, and our peace team remains hard at work putting together a plan, and we're going to continue pushing forward. I'm going to take one last question. Philip.
So the last suspects of terrorism were not trained in Syria or Iraq, and Thursday the Russians stopped their operations. They said that they'd gotten rid of ISIS in Syria. Saturday the Iraqi Prime Minister said this fight against ISIS is won. Why would the U.S. still need to fight on the ground over there?
Look, as long as there's any member of ISIS left, we want to continue pushing forward and making sure not only that they're eradicated, but that they don't quickly turn around and come back. And we'll continue to push forward in making sure we do what we can to defeat ISIS on all fronts, and certainly that we do what we can to protect American lives. Thanks so much, guys.